gonna see what a DUI attorney, that's me, thinks about the advice Redditors give about DUI law. Let's dig in. Can you get a DUI if you're sleeping in the back of your truck, separated from cab? As the topic states, I'm wondering if it is legal to sleep while intoxicated in the back of your truck. I have a topper and crash in the back sometimes on road trips. It seems to me like if it's separated from the cab of the truck, so I wouldn't think it would be an issue, but just wanted to double check. So this is posted in r/truck campers. And I guess the guy is thinking he's on a road trip and he's gonna drink some when he parks for the night, and he's wondering if he's gonna get a DUI. Well, I can tell you under Virginia law what the answer would be, but first, let's see what the Redditors have to say. Hammerhead says, that's gonna be highly dependent on where you are and if the cop is an a-hole or not. Hammerhead hits the nail on the head. A lot of these cases are subject to the interpretation of an officer. You have officers all over the country who have different views on things, different levels of aggressiveness about how they may want to enforce the law. And of course, why are they there in the first place? Did they get a complaint about your truck camper parked somewhere where it's not supposed to be? Did they get some kind of noise complaint? Are they just knocking on doors, seeing what's going on? There's all different varieties of what may be going on and why an officer may be investigating you sleeping in the back of your truck camper. And so it really depends upon, obviously, your state's law, but also the particular officer in question. HR 555 says, I guess that's a lot of fives, HZ5, I can't read, maybe I need glasses. He says, this is my own private domicile and I will not be harassed.
This is my own private domicile and I will not be harassed.
Unfortunately, it's not. The law differs based on your home versus an actual vehicle. Fourth Amendment jurisprudence has not caught up with van life. Basically, your home, your actual piece of real estate that you own or lease or rent, that is regarded very differently than sleeping in the back of a vehicle. Even if the vehicle is your home, even if you have no other home, your vehicle is still treated differently. The logic behind the Fourth Amendment treating an automobile much differently than your actual residence that's attached to the ground on a piece of property is because your automobile can get up and leave very quickly. Your residence that's attached to a piece of property, an actual house or even like a mobile home that's anchored down to the ground, that can't be moved very quickly. And therefore the police have time to go get a search warrant if needed. But a RV or truck camper can be moved in an instant, essentially. And so the Fourth Amendment jurisprudence does not require the police to have to go get a warrant in a lot of situations. Breadbed Man says, I think it really varies state to state, but at the end of the day, I think in most places, if a cop wants to arrest you, they can. It's really up to them. He wins a gold star. That's a really accurate comment, and it ties in with the first one about whether the cop's being an a-hole or not. Frankly, in a lot of areas, we have so many laws. There's enough potential violations that if an officer wants to arrest you for something, he can find something to arrest you for. This is one reason I always tell people, don't talk to the police, but don't be a jerk about it. Because if you're a jerk, you're just upping the ante and frankly encouraging an officer to arrest you. He continues, best option is to never tell the cops anything if they are bothering you. Never incriminate yourself for sure. That means never tell them you were just sleeping or camping. And most certainly never tell them you were drinking and just wanted to sleep it off instead of drive. Ask if you're under arrest, and if so, get a lawyer. It's actually some really good advice. Never tell the cops anything. Very good advice. Chip512 then says, don't talk to the police. I wonder if he's been watching this channel. Ever. If you have a significant interaction with police, ask for your attorney, nothing else. Everything you say will be used against you always applies, not just after arrest, as some people believe. Thank you, thank you. It's very true that everything will be used against you, no matter when you say it. Even if you say it while you're just having a friendly conversation with the officer on the side of the road, if he decides to arrest you, all those statements you make can be used against you in his ultimate case against you. Now we get into an answer that really gets to the nuts and bolts of can you sleep while drunk in the back of your truck camper. Rocky Mountain Toyota says many states have the same or similar verbiage as Florida. Quote, actual physical control of a vehicle means the defendant must be physically in the vehicle and have the capability to operate the vehicle. Quote, have the capability to operate is very broad and grants a ton of leeway to the investigating officer. So if you're in the bed of your truck sleeping it off and you have the keys, you have the capability to operate. In my opinion, you need better options. This answer really gets to the meat of the matter. Everybody has this misconception that a DUI means you actually have to be driving your vehicle down the road, driving while under the influence. But that's not what it means in Virginia. And if this definition is correct, that's not what it means in Florida. In Virginia, you can be guilty of DUI for operating your vehicle under the influence. But what does operating mean? Well, it's a much broader term than just driving. Driving would mean you're actually moving it down the road and you're in the driver's seat. But operating means you're in actual physical control of the vehicle, similar to the Florida's language. What does actual physical control mean? Well, there's cases in Virginia that state that just being behind the wheel, even if the car isn't going anywhere, if the car is, let's say, parked in a parking spot and you're sitting behind the wheel, the car's not running, you're in actual physical control. Because at any moment you could take off and be a drunk driver. And so that's kind of the theory. It's frankly, in my opinion, almost a thought crime or a crime in potentia because you're not actually endangering anyone. But the courts have ruled this way because they know that some cases it's hard to prove that the person actually ever physically moved the car. But what about if you're sitting elsewhere in the vehicle? That's the key question here for campers. If you're in the back in your pickup bed in your truck camper, is that a DUI? Under Virginia law, I don't think it would be. Virginia law would require that you're actually exercising control of the vehicle. So that typically means you're in the driver's seat, or you could also be using the electronic system of the vehicle. And this is where it gets tricky. If your truck camper is pretty fancy and you have some electronics that hook to the vehicle, let's say you got the engine running because it's really cold out, so you're running your heater in your truck camper, I think arguably you're in actual physical control of the vehicle. In Virginia, we had this distinction about was the ignition switch turned at all? And if people remember old-fashioned ignitions at this point, where you had the accessory position and then the actual on position of the vehicle. Virginia case law went into all those specifics about if your key is actually moved into the accessory position, it would be considered actually operating the vehicle because you're operating the physical components of the vehicle at that point. This goes back to the original point of whether or not the officer really wants to arrest you or not. If he wants to arrest you, he's probably going to do it anyway. But under Virginia law, I think unfortunately, it actually would be a pretty strong arrest, and the operation element of DUI would be pretty easy for them to prove. ZZ Top says, this gets fun if there are 3 people sleeping drunk in the back. Who is driving now? This is a really interesting question. If you got several people in the back of the vehicle and the engine's running in Virginia, could all these people be guilty potentially of DUI? I think it gets tricky if you have multiple people involved. This is the classic scenario where you have an accident, the police come up afterwards and you got several occupants outside the vehicle. Who was the driver? Unfortunately, people talk to the police. It's probably going to be very clear to the police who the driver is because they're going to talk. The police are going to know who runs the rig, who started the engine, that kind of thing, and probably they're just going to charge one person. We go on to Shalamblab. I don't know what his name is. Reddit names are hard to read. The answer is you could. However, the whole totality has to be looked at from the cop. From the start of the contact, are you impaired? He goes on quite a bit, and then we have a good reply from Formal Chicken that says, some states just say, in the vehicle with the keys, regardless of anything else. This goes back to, are you in control of the vehicle? Virginia law is not in the vehicle with the keys. And so here's what I would recommend, at least in Virginia. Let's say you're at a bar, you know you've had too much to drink, the bar kicks you out because it's 2 a.m., but you know you can't drive and you can't afford an Uber. What do? Well, the best solution is to frankly sit on the sidewalk. If you can't do that, what I would suggest is to be in the back seat of the vehicle. You never would want to be actually in the driver's seat. And so this goes back to the truck camper question. Can you be in your truck camper waiting it off before you can drive again? I think you can be. However, in Virginia, I don't think you can have the vehicle running. Because if you start the vehicle at all, if the keys are in the ignition at all, I think you got a problem. And if you have a keyless ignition, my recommendation would be to not have the keys on your person. I'd put them somewhere else in the vehicle, maybe in the front floorboard or something like that, and you be in the back seat. So if an officer came along, there's no claim you're actually operating the vehicle. You're just essentially using the vehicle for shelter at that point, and you're waiting on a ride to get there. That's the only safe way to approach it, in my opinion. Now, other states may vary depending on their state's laws. And Lighting the World says, good Lord, if you can get a DUI driving under the influence while sleeping in the back of your truck, then we would be living in an incredibly insane country. Well, unfortunately, we are. What about you? What do you think the law is in your state? Do you think you can get a DUI while sleeping it off in your truck camper? And remember, even if you're sleeping it off inside your pickup, don't talk to the police.